Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Welcome to Global Compliance Panel live webinar on conducting successful product complaint investigations. My name is Ron, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. On behalf of the Global Compliance Panel team, I'd like to thank you all for being part of this event. Today's webinar will be presented by David R. Dilts. A few words about David before we could start off today's session. David, Regulatory Affairs and Compliance Consultant, currently provides regulatory affairs, compliance, and quality consultative services for early stage and established class 1, 2, and 3 device, in vitro diagnostics and biopharmaceutical manufacturers on the global landscape, and also has an accomplished record with more than 24 years of experience in the areas of regulatory affairs, compliance, and quality systems. He has been previously employed with increasing responsibilities by medical device manufacturers and consultancies, including a globally recognized CRO, and has worked directly with manufacturers engaged in compliance remediation activities and services involving consent decrees, CIAs, warning letters, 483 observations, and customer-generated compliance events, and prepares for and conducts QS and regulatory audits. He has been directly involved with constructing, reviewing, and remediating regulatory submissions, including 510K, PMA, IDE applications, BLA, and NDA submissions, preparing supplements, amendments, and works closely with the key stakeholders and agencies or center reviewers regarding submission, meetings, and negotiations. We are honored to have David with us to present today's webinar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to take you all through a quick outline for this training session. As you all know, this webinar is for 16 minutes duration. First, David will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that will be covered, and he will then share with you his presentation. We would also like to inform all attendees, once a part of this teleconference, your phone lines will be placed on mute and would remain so until the Q&A window begins towards the end of the webinar. Also request all attendees to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of your time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. Now, if for any reason you get logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. And now that we're all ready to start, I request David to take it from here. David?
Thank you, Ron. I'd also like to extend my welcome to all of our attendees online today for the Global Compliance Panel webinar entitled Complaint Handling and Management from Receipt to Trending. This webinar will basically identify the key aspects of setting up, deploying, and maintaining your party complaint management system, with key emphasis from intake or receipt to some of the trending that is anticipated and expected by FDA and other regulatory agencies, and certainly some of the best practices at the end of the presentation that we'll briefly at a high level go over, including some of the categories and codes and escalation rules that are applicable for complaint handling, and more importantly, the degree of the investigational strategy that you are responsible for party complaints and for the responsibility on behalf of the complaint handling unit. Our agenda as set forth will certainly identify how to comprehend and why CAPA, corrective and preventive action, is correlated and certainly interfaced into the party complaint investigational process. We'll certainly provide a very high-level overview of the CAPA management system as it relates to the party complaint management system, regardless if you're using one system or a hybrid system whereby CAPA is independent and segregated from complaint handling, or CAPA and party complaint handling systems are intertwined or interfacing on behalf of your management system. Nonetheless, we'll certainly provide some tools that are currently being used to prepare for, conduct, facilitate, and close out your investigations, with primary emphasis today on RCA, root cause analysis. We'll certainly want to address how far and how in-depth do you go with your investigations, also known as the drill down or deep dive, in order to ascertain and confirm the assignable root cause that led to the initial alleged and or confirmed complaint on behalf of our pharmaceutical, medical device, and biotech and biologic manufacturers online today. Certainly, we will emphasize at a high level again what are the current FDA hot buttons and trends, as well as documentation red flags and triggers, as well as benchmarks and best practices for investigations. Furthermore, we'll certainly be able to identify and describe and expound on some of the characteristics that identify and describe a good investigator, and the emphasis on closed-loop investigations from pre to post or end to end. And that's going to be very important in order to be a good investigator for any and all product complaint investigations going forward. Furthermore, why are risk-based approaches vital to the decision-making process? Certainly, several, as well as a lot of manufacturers on the global landscape are starting to and have integrated a risk management process into the decision-making process on behalf of product complaints, as well as the subsequent investigations using RPNs, also known as risk priority numbers, and assigning various characteristics that identify the risk priority numbers. Certainly, this is going to be indicative of a best practice and approach being used by a lot of our global manufacturers and OEMs at large. And finally, we want to ensure that we're able to improve and bulletproof your product complaint management system with investigations and closure, which means effectiveness verification checks if this is tied into your CAPA management program. The key point with this webinar is to ensure that you have prepared for, conducted, executed, and closed out a very thorough, deep dive, in-depth, methodical, systematic product complaint investigation, as well as looking at some of the various trending categories and descriptions on behalf of manufacturers as part of your complaint management system. And then certainly at the end of our presentation, we'll allocate some time for Q&A and address any and all questions that you may have. However, if we do run out of time at the end of our hour, certainly do not hesitate to contact Global Compliance Panel with any questions or requests for clarification as deemed appropriate and necessary, and we'll certainly follow up to your request in reasonable time and to ensure that you have the information that you need in order to facilitate your decision-making process going forward on behalf of the complaint management process. Again, I'd like to extend my welcome to all of our participants online today. This webinar hopefully is going to provide valuable assistance and guidance to the life science manufacturers online today, engaged in the various aspects of the product complaint investigations. As we all know, for those online today, irrespective of position title and type of manufacturer that you may be, an effective complaint handling system is an extremely important part of your quality management system, or QMS. That is a part of your internal surveillance program. It's a monitoring tool in the eyes of FDA, so complaint handling is a very critical aspect and component of any system on behalf of our manufacturers at large today. Manufacturers should understand that any complaint received on a product must be evaluated and, if necessary, thoroughly investigated and analyzed, and the appropriate corrective action and other evaluation responsibilities taken to ensure that you ascertain the root cause that led to the initial complaint once confirmed. It's also very important to understand that there will be times whereby an investigation may not be necessary, but it's equally important to be able to defend and justify your rationale by providing a substantive and defensible position in conclusion as to why investigation was not necessary or warranted based on the conditions as prescribed. So it's very important that we clearly identify the regulatory expectations on behalf of pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturers today. Certainly, the results of your evaluation or investigation or assessment or analysis should lead to a conclusion that's defensible and substantive regarding whether the complaint was valid, what the root cause of the complaint was, and certainly what assignable action or corrective actions are necessary to prevent further reoccurrence or occurrence. It's also very important that some of these complaints could be categorized or viewed as acute or chronic. It could be isolated, or it could be a systemic or recurring problem on a routine basis. Regardless of how you differentiate and classify the type of complaints, any complaint needs to be properly vetted, assessed, evaluated, unless you can defend, stipulate otherwise as part of your documentation process. Certainly, without question your SOP on how to prepare for, facilitate, and conduct a prior complaint investigation, and what your complaint handling procedure really